Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Good afternoon.
That's right. That's right. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start by saying that this interview has a lot of personal meaning for me because I'm a huge fan of your restaurants, just like everyone else in Miami. So anyway, what you do is truly amazing, and I'm a huge foodie. So anyway, I
Well,
love your cooking.
I would argue that what you do is amazing. We just make food. You're saving lives and doing much more important work. So thank you for what you do.
Well, while we have everyone joining, I'm just going to do a quick introduction for people who may not know who you are, the few who may not know, but we are lucky to have Chef Michael Schwartz here. He's a nationally recognized celebrity chef, James Beard Award winner, owner of the Genuine Hospitality Group, and a best-selling cookbook author. I love his philosophy when he talks about food. He says the secret to good food is good food. He's beloved by locals here in Miami and really all over the country. He opened up Michael's Genuine in 2007, which has become a world-recognized restaurant. Rapidly expanded and formed the Genuine Hospitality Group, which currently operates 9 restaurants, including Michael's Genuine, which is his flagship restaurant, 4 locations of Pizzeria, Genuine Pizza, Harry's Pizza, Ellie Pop Cafe, Amara de Paraiso, which has the greatest view on the planet, Traymore, Tigertail Mary, and he opened up a second location of his flagship, Michael's Genuine, in Cleveland. What's your tie to Cleveland, by the way, Michael? Was that random?
Yeah, I lost a bet.
Okay.
And, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm having trouble with my, my setup over here, so just bear with me.
I was making sure you weren't like a Cleveland Browns fan or something.
No, I'm a miserable Eagles fan, which is worse. But Cleveland was a weird one-off when we were in Pizzeria expansion mode to see if we could take the show on the road, and for a variety of reasons that morphed into a Michael's Genuine with great partners in Cleveland, and we love it there, although it's super cold right now and they're basically, in hibernation. So
I hear you.
I think people around the country don't really realize how lucky we are to be in South Florida and to be open and be able to, move around the city and go enjoy restaurants and so.
Yeah, we are very, very lucky. So just finishing the intro, then he rapidly expanded into catering, which we'll get into, which was a huge blessing with the pandemic, with Michael Schwartz's Catering, offering full service in-restaurant and off-site events. Outside of the restaurants, he's very active with the community, focuses his time and energy on arts and causes such as Share Our Strength, Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, Slow Food, and Wellness in Schools. And like I said, he's author of 2 best-selling cookbooks, with his second cookbook, Genuine Pizza, Better Pizza at Home, which came out in 2019. And he's here to talk to us, as I said, about the very important topic. COVID has devastated the restaurant industry, really all of the hospitality business. So look forward to talking to you about how you managed it, how you actually managed to do well, and what you see the future being. So again, thanks for joining us, Mike.
No, it's my pleasure. Really my pleasure. Thanks for that intro. You got to edit it a little bit post-COVID, but most of that, most of that is true. So thank you.
Well, we'll start by saying, when did you, as a chef and as a restaurant owner, when did you realize that this was going to be a real issue for you?
Yeah, I was, I was the one that sort of was in denial and stuck my head in the sand. My business partner is the one that was continually sounding the alarm, saying this is gonna, the shit's gonna hit the fan, and so but then it was quick. The reality came on pretty quick, and I remember it went from me poo-pooing the idea that we needed to start wearing masks, or there might be some some lockdown regulations issued, to full swing shutting down the restaurants, and it was pretty quick. We made the decision, I think, early on, as it really just started to progress rapidly. I think we got a little bit ahead of the curve and decided that we didn't want to put, our staff and our guests in harm's way. So we shut down all the restaurants completely, and it took quite some time for us to even entertain the idea of doing delivery and takeout. and trying to get people, to come to work. So, and it's funny, it's about a year ago, a little less, and sometimes it seems like last week, and sometimes it seems like, 10 years ago. So It's been a whirlwind for our industry. But I would say, and I'll probably get ahead of you on your questions, but just the thought that popped into my mind is lots of silver linings, lessons learned, and opportunities on the other side. Now, getting through it, like I said, during your introduction, for us, we're so lucky. The whole country, if not the whole world, is on lockdown now, and we're still able to operate pretty, we create our own SOPs and guidelines around COVID safety, but just the fact that we have been, for months and months now, able to operate is a blessing that is not afforded to the rest of the country. So
yeah, absolutely could not agree more. What would you say when you first found out, again, February, March of last year, what were your immediate top 3 priorities as an owner?
It's funny because they shift, at first we sort of think about it as maybe, an interruption and just not knowing really. I don't think anyone, well, there are probably some people that understood the magnitude of what was going to happen, but I certainly was not one of those people. And so I think it sort of felt like a hurricane was coming and we needed to close the restaurants for a few days, until we got some indication that, it was going to be safe to go back to work. And so that was like the initial, okay, it'll be a couple days, be a couple weeks is what we really thought. And so I think my initial reaction was a lot different than what ultimately our reaction was. And as we saw it unfold, we knew the severity of it. And, it was sort of like a hunker down and work the problem. And there were many problems. We laid off all of our employees. We weren't sure when help was going to come in terms of, any aid, grants, PPP, EIDL, any of that stuff. And it was so fast moving that we were just sort of, in crisis work the problem mode. And that's what we did. And I have a business partner that fortunately for me, not only is my best friend, but he is a brilliant business person. And we have a great team around us internally and professionals that we rely on, CPAs and lawyers and bankers, and we work together as a team. And those people, we're indebted to forever because, we just sort of figured it out. And I think some businesses did better at figuring it out than others, and I think that what I'm proud of and I'm most thankful for my business partner is that we did it in a very thoughtful, methodical way. There was no knee-jerking. There was no reacting to what we thought was the right thing to do. We worked the problem with a bunch of people around a table virtually, and we figured it out the best that we could.
So talk about that transition, because that's so important. How you hunkered down, how you had to let go of staff, which obviously must have been a very difficult decision, and then transitioning from in-restaurant dining to really delivery, catering, takeout. How long was that process? How did you manage that overall transition?
Yeah, those are all good questions, and it's making me relive this crazy year that we had. And I would say, we sort of riding on this, wave of being fortunate to be down here, never really had to, for a very long time, rely exclusively on takeout and delivery. In fact, in the beginning, for many, many weeks, if not months, we didn't do it. We just didn't feel comfortable putting people back to work, and people weren't comfortable. And we were sort of figuring out the landscape with, how long this would last, how the PPP is going to work, is there going to be other bailouts? So I think that my point was we never had to rely, like so many places around the country, on takeout and delivery and meal kits. And because I'll tell you, as simple as it sounds, right? Like catering is part of food and beverage hospitality. So is takeout and delivery. So are meal kits. But those are all separate businesses that require separate thought process and strategy around them. And so it was hard to figure that out. And I think by the time we started to figure out delivery and takeout, the dining room's open. So fortunately, we didn't have to get good at something that we're really not very good at. Some of our restaurants obviously thrive on delivery and takeout, the pizzerias, for instance. But Michael's Genuine and Amara and Tigertail and Mary, that food really doesn't translate to takeout and delivery unless you sort of modify it or engineer it for that. And we did a little bit of that in the beginning, but felt like we were lucky that we didn't have to. So, you know, but I think, you know, the big takeaway at the end of the year, or looking back at the year, was how flexible people were. And the people that we hired back, it was important to hire back people that were willing to do whatever, you know, and do multiple jobs and wear multiple hats. From our executive team level all the way down into the field, we needed and wanted and sort of expected people to be able to, you know, contribute in ways that they hadn't in the past. And I think that the pandemic sort of brought that mentality together in our industry, which, you know, is through my career has often been difficult to achieve. You know, ask a server to, you know, to wash dishes for a little bit and see how that goes. So I think in the beginning, everyone was game for whatever. And, you know, I think people slip back into their old habits if we let them. But a lot of the silver linings and lessons learned for us were, you know, how to operate more efficiently and more empathetically to our staff, you know, and to go through that adversity. I think you come out the other side better. So we're, you know, but we're still sort of transitioning and processing. You know, we were stuck in sort of, you know, crisis mode for so long. Now we're trying to train ourselves to operate not in crisis mode and to get back to doing the things that, you know, that we know are important to do, and some of the disciplines and some of the, you know, financial, you know, hygiene around running a business, you know, because we're not in crisis mode.
And so how was the federal funding? Was that sufficient in your opinion? Did that help?
That's a great question. You know, right when the pandemic started, a bunch of colleagues in my industry started the Independent Restaurant Coalition. And they put it together pretty quickly with a bunch of lobbyists and brilliant minds and some politicians to figure out how to get, you know, the restaurant community the money that they needed. And so they've done amazing work in putting together a bill that's really a stimulus focused for independent restaurants. Not, you know, PPP that's limited in what you can use it for and how much you get, or if you're not forgiven for it, becomes a loan, or disaster relief money, which is sort of an SBA long-term loan, but really just bailout money for our industry. And so for us, you know, navigating through PPP and getting some disaster relief and now PPP2, it's helpful. But you know, by and large, the response you'll get from that question is it's not enough. We need, you know, the Restaurants Act to pass, and we need more money. And that's what people will tell you.
Yeah. I mean, just like you were saying, looking at opportunities for growth, how the restaurant industry is going to change into the future. Let's start looking at some of the positives. You know, how do you think the whole work from home has affected the restaurant industry? I was reading about this, and just the fact that people aren't going to work as much changes lunch, breakfast, early dinners. Is that something you have seen either with your restaurants or your colleagues?
Well, it's interesting. I think you're asking me from a different point of view than I was going to answer you. I think you're saying, how has it affected business? Because maybe people aren't out and socializing as much. And that's a good point. I don't think about it like that. I think about it from a productivity standpoint for us. And in our company, we're having these conversations now because, like, for instance, I'm back in my office today and have realized, you know, over the months that I'm much more productive when I'm in an office environment, and B, my connection with my peers, especially in hospitality, me being in the restaurants or being in the office and having face-to-face interactions, obviously social distance and masked, are hugely important. And I think that in the beginning of this, you know, everyone sort of fell in love with this idea of working from home. And I think that there is definitely a place for that, and it's going to continue to be. But I know for me, I'm not that productive, and I don't feel that connection with the people that I rely on every day to convey our message of hospitality and excellence and whatever it is that we're going to want to talk about. So it's different. In terms of it affecting business, it's hard to say because, you know, our seating capacity is limited now. So you could go to the restaurants and say, man, you're always busy. I can't get a seat. You're doing great. And that's true. We are doing great. We're busy, but we're not anywhere near the capacity that we used to be at. So I think people, you know, if we were having this conversation in Chicago, that you'd have different questions and I'd have different answers. But here in Miami, you know, to be honest with you, sometimes my jaw drops because people behave as if there is no pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
You go to restaurants that are just packed and bars are packed and no one's social distancing. And so, I mean, we choose not to do that, but you could forget pretty easily around here that there's a problem.
Yeah. And you had mentioned earlier, you know, that what is the silver lining, right? I mean, after every crisis, there's always introspection, growth, opportunities for real improvement.
Yeah.
What do you think are the growth opportunities for the restaurant industry once this clears?
I think that well, you know, there will still continue to be fallout, right? As we're in the dead of winter now, and, you know, places up north are in hibernation. That's what all my friends say. We're hibernating. That means their restaurants are closed. I think we'll still continue, even with PPP2, to see restaurants close. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We see cases going down and restrictions being lifted around the country. So, I mean, part of me thinks that, you know, the tail end of this year, Q3, Q4, are going to be, you know, like one big party. And people are going to be relieved and want to get out. And after having been cooped up, the question is, will they have money to spend? Because they're affected by, you know, the pandemic. And then there's other questions surrounding variants and how this, you know, virus is going to react to the vaccine. But I'm excited for the opportunities. I think, you know, you mentioned our catering company has been pretty much dark for the last year. But inquiries are through the roof right now because people are expecting that there'll be a vaccine, that they'll be able to get it, and they'll be able to go out. So I'm optimistic. From an operational standpoint, there's so many lessons learned. I think that we have learned how to, you know, trim the fat, operate more sensibly, look critically at everything that we do, and that affects not only our, you know, bottom line on our P&L, but the customer experience. And I think that we've learned how to manage more efficiently without compromising, you know, quality. And that's a big takeaway, because in our business, you know, the margins suck.
Yeah.
You know? And we're fortunate to have landlords throughout our company that, you know, understood and worked with us. So I think the future's bright. It's been a dark year, you know, and it'll continue to, you know, to sort of limp into spring and summer, but I'm optimistic.
You know, speaking about that delivery, takeout, catering, all of the non-in-restaurant dining, that was starting to pick up before the pandemic, and then it obviously took off at light speed with the pandemic. Do you think that we're going to go back to the way it was before, or do you think that delivery, takeout, catering is going to play a major role after the pandemic? Has human interaction changed enough to have a new normal?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, yeah, both. Yes and yes. It'll get back to more normal. I think people will realize that, part of the enjoyment around eating is being out and being in a social environment. But I do think that, delivery and delivery platforms and at-home meal kits and catered smaller functions are here to stay. But I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think people are going to be excited to get back out and support their neighborhood restaurant and feel, that for me, and maybe it's just me because I'm in the restaurant business my whole life, but it's not the same. Like, I want to be in a restaurant. I want to hear the clanking of glasses and plates and chatter. And even when I'm annoyed that there's too many people or someone's talking too loud, I mean, that's part of the experience. And I think that it enriches our lives in a way that we're going to realize, not in Miami, but in the rest of the world, for people that haven't had the opportunity to go out, that they miss it. So, we had some people from New York come to the restaurant, some chef friends of mine, about a month ago. And, I went to see them and they were sitting inside and it was a beautiful night out. And I said, why are you guys sitting inside? And they're like, you don't understand. We haven't been able to do this in months and we miss being in a restaurant. They weren't scared about, the tables were spaced apart, but I was just surprised, but it made a lot of sense to me. They wanted to be out in a restaurant and have that experience that they hadn't been able to have for so long. So
yeah, no, it's definitely, there's nothing like being in a restaurant. I totally echo those feelings. Sitting down, the entire environment, the food, the camaraderie, the atmosphere, it's just, you can't really replace it. Speaking about New York, as you brought that up, there's a lot of experts talking about cities like New York and let's say San Francisco that have been on lockdown much longer than us. Yeah. And the experts say that there's a potential for 50% of the restaurants in New York City and San Francisco to not be able to open up. Now, those are two of the greatest dining cities in the world. Yeah. How devastating is that for New York and San Francisco? 50% of the restaurants can't open up after the pandemic. Yeah,
and that's a good number, 50%. That's happening right now. I think that people don't realize that that's happening. So when you see social media talk about Independent Restaurant Council or this Restaurants Act or stimulus for independent restaurants, it's no joke. I mean, these places are going to close if they haven't already closed. And the number was higher than that, 6 months ago. So it's happening. It's devastating. Look, New York and San Francisco aren't going anywhere. They're going to rebound. But there's millions of workers that are affected by this. And I think it's hard for us to remember that. And I don't want to keep harping on that we're in Miami but it's hard to imagine because you can go to a restaurant right now and the restaurants are busy and new restaurants are opening. You look at, there's like an influx of New York operators that are opening restaurants right now, but in the rest of the country, they're shut down and many of them won't open. And it's it'll take a decade to rebuild from this. In terms of, if you lived in New York, your favorite neighborhood restaurants, those are the ones that are suffering the most.
Yeah. So. It's tough times. I mean, let's talk about people who potentially benefited from this. So e-commerce, Amazon obviously just did amazing during the pandemic. Is there anyone in the restaurant industry, let's say maybe third-party delivery, Uber Eats, Delivery Dudes, DoorDash, Who's benefited from this in the restaurant industry? Anyone?
Just named them all. It's funny. I saw a tweet after the Super Bowl. There was a Super Bowl ad for Uber urging you to support local. And, so they paid, I don't know, $10 million for their 15-second ad. And they're raping restaurants, literally stealing from them by charging 30% to deliver your food to your customers. And I just thought that was ironic. So, I think those third-party delivery platforms have definitely, have definitely found their niche, and then, there's these opportunities for companies like Reef and Ghost Kitchens to emerge. And, so they've capitalized. And like you said, I think that there was sort of an upward trajectory of that before the pandemic. And then this just really put it over the top. So, but I can't think of many more industries within the restaurant and hospitality industry that have benefited. But I'm sure there's other ones. But we know that the people that have suffered the most, the farmers, the fishermen, the winemakers, the cheesemakers, the distribution houses, the linen provider, the uniform provider, the bakers. It touched so many tentacles. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you. Looking at the vaccine, as a restaurant owner, are you mandating vaccination in your employees? Is that something that you're able to do?
That's a great question, and it's funny. We haven't had that discussion, although I think we probably will. You just brought up a pretty good one. I can't imagine how that would work, and the legalities of it. And frankly, if I would want to take that position, that's a tough one. There's plenty of people that are anti-vaccine, and for whatever reason wouldn't feel comfortable taking it. And I don't know that I'd want to threaten their job with that. That's a slippery slope, but probably will be discussed.
Yeah. It's a very slippery slope.
I've seen some stories of other operators on the news that were saying that they wanted to do that. I just can't imagine that.
Yeah, I guess the question is, you don't want to force someone to take the vaccine if it doesn't affect other people. But if they're working at your restaurant, they're working with other people, you need to reestablish trust with the clientele. Wouldn't it be great to tell your clientele, all our workers are vaccinated? So it's obviously, it's not just one person. It affects the entire work setting. That's why I was asking. But I'm glad you're making that decision. And it's a very tough decision. I'm glad it's you and not me.
Thanks.
So what can you and the other restaurant owners do to kind of reestablish trust once the pandemic's over, the vaccine is rolling out nicely? What can you do to kind of reestablish trust? Is there anything that you're doing in terms of promoting that?
Trust within who?
Amongst the patrons, people who come into your restaurant.
That's a really good question. And, I think our actions speak for themselves. If you come to our restaurants, we practice what we preach. We follow the new normal guidelines. We do the best that we can. I'm sure that we slip up every once in a while, but we do measure distance between tables. We mandate mask wearing when you're not seated at your table. We just reopened our bars after stopping and starting several times because people couldn't follow the rules. So we're just going to have to continue to operate in a way that makes us and our staff and our guests comfortable. There's other restaurants in Miami that are not following those guidelines, and people are going to them and they're fine with it. We feel like our core clientele, us and our staff, appreciates us upholding the social distance SOPs that we put in place 6 months ago. Hasn't changed. So we'll continue to do that and to do what we think is right, based on the health and well-being of our family, meaning our staff and our guests, and not driven by, trying to drive a couple extra bucks on the top line.
That's a great way to look at it. Just wrapping up, because it's been half an hour, I'm going to ask you that $1 million question. Looking 5-10 years down the road, what does the restaurant industry look like compared to now?
Yeah. I think it looks a lot like it did before the pandemic. I really do. I think that's my hope, that we get back. Look, at Michael's Genuine, we had some tables that were literally 10 inches apart. Do I think that it's going to go back to that? No. I don't think it might not ever go back to that. But I do see the restaurant industry rebounding from this pretty swiftly, and hopefully more independent, thoughtful, interesting approaches to opening restaurants and hospitality, and hopefully not just a bunch of bigger companies with more money and chains sort of taking over the vacant spots in the neighborhoods now that lost restaurants. So I'm pretty optimistic, and people that know me would say that I'm not really optimistic person. I'm not a super positive person, but I think I'm realistic and optimistic that the industry is going to rebound, and that we'll look back on this, man, for so many reasons and go, what the hell happened? So
Yeah,
that's my hope.
I agree with you, because I think there's way too many foodies in this world for it to not happen. So, again, thank you for your time, Mike. It's really amazing how you've made it through this pandemic, a real example for other restaurant owners. And again, thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of your food, just like millions of other people. And for those who haven't tried the mushroom pizza at Harry's Pizzeria, it's insane. It's insane. It's the best.
Thank you.
That's the greatest pizza on the planet.
I would say thank you, obviously, for what you're doing and for your support and supporting local businesses and promoting people like me and propping up the industry. So thanks, man. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks again, okay? Take
Cheers.
care. Have a great afternoon.